welcome everybody. It is good to see you here today. I just wanted to brief you a little bit on the negotiations and what's been going on for the last couple of weeks with House and Senate Republicans and Democrats. We've been exchanging offers quite a bit from our side. It's been a little slower coming from the Democrat side on the offers coming back to us. And we shared with you today our most recent offer that we have sent out. The Senate Republicans and House Republicans have been in lockstep in our offers, and we've done some compromises from our initial offers that we gave off. We've increased the cash. We've also increased on the GO bonding that we would be willing to go up to. I think right now we're at the 890 mark on our offers going forward. And we believe a lot of that should be focused on infrastructure, on the needs of Minnesotans, things like roads, bridges, wastewater, drinking water, just the everyday needs of Minnesotans. We saw a lot of spending last year on the nonprofit organizations that didn't impact Minnesotans' everyday lives. And we think a bonding bill should be what it's supposed to be on the capital projects going forward. So we've been willing to compromise a small amount also on a couple of very critical nonprofits that the Democrats have wanted to see. So we've been willing to do up to $2 million on those as well. But we've also have just a very short list of asks too. You know, things like the EMS services across the state. They are hurting. They are in a terrible position right now. And we don't think we should be tying bonding to EMS funding. We are not going to be negotiating on people's lives right now. That's just something that should be happening moving forward. We also want to make sure that religious liberties across the state are protected. We've been working hard to see that happen. And part of the filibuster, the work that went on over at the House yesterday was to ensure that that continued to move forward. And Leader Damath will talk a little bit more about that as well. The other thing we want to see, and I think is the most critical piece to this whole end of session, is bipartisanship. Look, bipartisanship is going to be the spoonful of sugar that makes this whole end of session go down. And if we can make that happen, working together, that's what Minnesotans expect. Instead, you see a very, very sharp contrast where the Democrats are relying on a alleged felon in the Senate for their one vote majority to make sure they can keep their extreme agenda moving forward. And so, you know, we are going to continue to push forward here. We're going to try to meet with the Democrats, try to do good faith negotiations with them. But it's come to a point where we've got to make sure that people know why, if this bonding bill does fail, that it's not because we haven't been working hard, doing our bit of work to make sure that Minnesotans are taken care of. With that, I want to turn it over to Leader Damath to talk a little bit from the House side.
Well, good afternoon. Again, thank you for being here and being willing to listen to some of the concerns that we have had, and appreciate the work of Senator Johnson and what is happening here in the legislature. We are just less than 100 hours left to go, less than 5 days. We're down to 4 legislative days, and I just want to welcome you to the chaos of one-party DFL control in the state of Minnesota. We know that Democrats right now in the House are spending their time passing bills that a lot of them have no chance of passing in the Senate. In our limited time left, I have to wonder how serious they really are in getting some of these things done. They have had all session to push their priorities through, and House Republicans have made good faith offers to help this session come to a smooth end. We have made those offers earlier in session, and then with the chaos in the Senate, we have reiterated those messages. Let's find some good work that we can do on a bipartisan basis and get to work for the state of Minnesota. But what we have seen is that it appears Democrats would rather work with an accused felon for a partisan vote on partisan priorities. They would prioritize the 34-33 vote rather than working effectively with Republicans. What we're seeing is we're seeing provisions come in conference committees that have never been heard on the House floor, have never been heard in committees. And when the Democrats are doing that, you're right, we are going to debate these things and these bills and take our time making our voices heard and getting points across. Democrats have left Republicans out of negotiations on unfinished issues like Uber, Lyft, and bonding, as you've heard from Senator Johnson. We have exchanged offers, but we have mostly been left out of the loop. We're learning through the press what is happening on these negotiations rather than hearing from our Democrat colleagues. And we're not even hearing what's up next on the House floor many times until it's actually brought up to take action on. So when our constituents are completely shut out of the conversation, that does have consequences. We are willing to work with the Democrats to bring this session to an orderly close if they are going to act like they actually want to work with us over the next 4 days. Democrats want to come in and jam through an agenda that is full of partisan priorities, but yet they expect Republicans to be there and just vote. Our voices are going to be used. As you have heard, the religious exemption on the Human Rights Act was a priority that passed out of the House and the Senate, full green board. Our expectation is that would have made its way to the governor the end of last week, possibly the beginning of last week. What we discovered while we were on the House floor and got verification on it yesterday was that the Speaker and the President and the Senate had not yet signed the enrollment, and it was not on its way to the governor. That was problematic. That was a priority of Minnesotans, and that was problematic. With our work that we did on the House floor yesterday, the Speaker was then able to sign that enrollment later on last evening, and that brought some of the discussion to a close, and we were able to move on from there. My understanding is that enrollment will be signed by the President of the Senate. That is our hope, and that is going to the governor. We are waiting for confirmation on that. So Republicans do represent millions of Minnesotans, and their voice deserves to be heard. Legislating is not supposed to be at the tyranny of the majority. It is supposed to reflect the values of all Minnesotans. And with that, I am happy to take questions.
Are you receiving pushback from the $30 million EMS funding ask from the DFLers?
Well, that's part of the discussion that we're having with DFL on that right now. And so trying to figure out the right number for that. But again, we're not going to be negotiating on the lives of Minnesotans. EMS is one of those basic government services that all Minnesotans expect to have somebody show up at your door if you're having a heart attack or a medical emergency in some respect. And so we are working to get the numbers there for EMS.
Are they offering a lower or higher number for EMS funding?
I think on your sheet, you should see the offers that have been exchanged on that, so take a peek at that. But you're right in the ballpark there with the $30 million.
Do you mean when you say the local project, it says 62.5 million per caucus? Is that times 4? Because the number next to it is
That's right.
125 million.
That's right, Peter.
So 125 per party, so 250 for local projects.
That's right, yep.
So when it says on the sheet, no ERA countries permitted, does that mean that there'll be no Martin bill if the ERA passes, or they keep trying to pass the ERA?
I'm going to take that.
Yeah, that is part of what is in our offer, and we're willing to have those discussions. If this had been a true priority for House Democrats, they would have had this done earlier. The Senate did pass the ERA bill last year. The House has waited, the Democrats have waited to bring that up until the final weeks of session. So that is part of a discussion. The Senate language is a little bit more palatable. As we have heard, there was a poll out yesterday that right now, what is in the ERA language that would go on as a constitutional amendment, over 64% of Minnesotans would like to have those two things separated out. So that is definitely part of the discussion as we move forward in these final hours.
And if I could add to that one too, the ERA bill that you're familiar with, and I think a lot of Minnesotans, if they are familiar with the ERA, they're used to a bill that came out of the 70s. This is just a euphemism for really an attack on religious liberties across the state. It is something that, based on the House language that's tacked on there, has become a very extreme bill, and they're only using that title of ERA on that to get this language across. So it is very detrimental to Minnesotans just across the state. And so hopefully, that's something that we put on as a condition of our bonding that they could listen to. It needs a lot more discussion at this point, and hopefully we can get that.
So when they say that the religious protection already in the state constitution would protect those rights, you don't buy that?
Not at all. I mean, that's again something they're going to have to go out and now litigate every time that this comes up. So they are going to use the court system then as a way, it could be a risk to our religious institutions going forward, always constantly being at risk of being sued for something and trying to get the judicial interpretation of that. So absolutely.
So it sounded like you specifically are making that a condition for agreeing to a bonding bill. Could you agree to the language that the Senate passed last year?
Yeah, and I think we have to sit down and have negotiations. Just like I said earlier, if we can have a bipartisan agreement on this, I think it has a pathway forward. But by cutting Republicans out of the room, out of the negotiations, it makes it very, very rough to finish this session up with bills as extreme as this ERA bill and other ones that are involved with that too. So,
Follow up on
absolutely.
Steve's question, is that actually a condition for passing bonding, or would you pass bonding no matter what they did with this? Because again, I think we've had this discussion, bonding is where you guys actually get projects.
Do you want to go for that?
Everything that we have on the list that we've shared, those are our conditions. Again, if Democrats want to work with Republicans, we are happy to have those conversations. Could we look at some negotiating within the other conditions? Absolutely, but we have to be brought to the table in a serious and meaningful way with leadership to know if that's the direction that they want to go.
Councilor Washington.
No, if you have follow-ups, go ahead.
No, it's.
Okay, we're gonna do this,
I'll let-
we're gonna do this Minnesota game.
Superior.
Just a point of clarification on the Minnesota Human Rights Act change. Was that a standalone bill, or was that part of an omnibus? I'm forgetting now.
That was definitely a standalone.
Okay, in both chambers, so it is before the governor right now to be signed?
We're waiting for clarification. It finally moved out of the House from the Speaker yesterday over to the Senate. The President of the Senate is supposed to be signing that today, and from there it would go to the governor. We are waiting for that clarification.
There was no changes that would require another Senate?
No,
Okay.
no, it was clean, and it was a complete green board in both chambers, and so it shouldn't.
I just wanted to make sure that I was
That's right.
understanding the process.
Yep, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Given the way that things have gone so far, with 4 days remaining, how many bills could actually get through the House and the Senate if they don't agree to, or if you guys don't reach an agreement?
Well, I think if the House keeps talking, I don't know if we're going to get one or two through there at that point. But I mean, it's.
Depends on the work.
We have 4 days left. We have session Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And if we can come together and talk about these bills and have 4-leader sign off on them on a bipartisan manner, we could get through these bills very quickly. And that's all we're asking. We're not asking for the sun and the moon here. What we're asking for is just bipartisanship. That's what Minnesotans expect, and that's what we want to do.
You've raised a lot of issues about transparency and lack of full vetting of bills, things just going to Rules Committee and without being seen in other committees. Would the amendment, the constitutional amendment to extend the session endlessly, would that help with that issue?
That's a terrible idea. Can you imagine, given more time, what our state would actually look like? I think, having the constitutional deadline of when we have to finish session by May 20th, it forces us to work together. And as you see, under full one-party control right now, we're down to the last 4 days. Can you imagine if that requirement was removed? When would we actually get things done for Minnesota? Whether it was one-party control or divided government, it would continually push out. I am not in favor of a full-time legislature.
There have been some concerns that Senator Housley has not been attending some of the bonding meetings. Is that a strategy that isn't obvious, or can you comment on that?
So look, we've got this offer, and we've been trying to get a global deal for that. Senator Pappas and Fu Lee have taken upon themselves to have a joint bonding hearing today at 3 o'clock. I don't even know how you have a joint bonding hearing or capital investment hearing when you don't have the number that you're shooting for. Right, so this is a dog and pony show that's being put on to make sure that our members are feeling the pressure on that. The reality is, if we can get a global number, if we can say, yes, this is what we agreed to, then it will take a very short time to actually get that capital investments bill together and passed off the floor, whatever that deal is going to be. So that's, again, we're continuing to ask for partnership. Let's get a deal done. And then we can worry about the bonding bill. But now wasting time in these committee hearings, these made-up committee hearings for vetting these projects to make it a political statement or something. Karen is doing, Senator Housley is doing the right thing. She's waiting until we have that number, and then we can start talking and building that bonding bill to that point.
Do you have your number yet? Do you have your list of projects you want within this umbrella?
Well, we're prepared whenever it comes together that we can do that. So Senator Housley and her staff have been working very hard to do that, and we're prepared.
Are your caucuses in alignment on the projects in a bonding bill? It sounds like Representative Erdahl is supportive of what's coming forward today.
So that work is being done within our caucus too, and again, heavy in infrastructure, those things, those guidelines that we've put out. We don't have a final version of what those projects would be, but we're definitely working on it, and it could be done in just a few minutes if needed.
You mentioned provisions appearing in conference committee that hadn't been heard. Which ones are you kind of referring to there?
Sure, so in the elections conference committee report yesterday, there was a financial point that had never been heard in the Senate. There's some things in the energy bill as to do with the PUC and the permitting piece that had never gone through the process, and so things do just magically appear.
If there was an Uber Lyft bill that had the support of Uber and Lyft, would you guys pass that quickly?
It depends on, were we in the room and helping to negotiate that bill? Again, we'll come back to bipartisanship, where they are continuing to take these agreements or whatever they're working on, keeping Republicans out. We're going to have a problem until we're brought in and have an input on these bills. That affects a lot of our members, Uber and Lyft, and so we want to make sure that we have a voice on that too for their constituents.
Have Senator House Republicans had anything to do with discussions about what an actual compromise bill would look like, or have it been more or less completely shut out?
On the Uber and Lyft issue?
So, I mean, from our side, on the Senate side, I know Senator Rasmussen has been trying to have some input on that. Now, it hasn't been received all that well from the DFL counterparts, but he's continuing to try to work on that and to know about on the.
So in the House, Representative Garofalo has been working on that, and as you saw a press conference last week by the majority leader in the House, that wasn't really a press conference. I'm not quite sure how that rolled out, but Representative Garofalo had said it was very interesting to see that a deal had been reached, but they never involved Uber and Lyft on that deal. So we're willing to be there. We're willing to have conversations, but this is a Democrat initiative that actually was that city of Minneapolis and their city council created this issue. But we're willing to help out where we can if we're invited to the conversation.
Should we expect tomorrow's House floor session to look similar to yesterday's?
Well, I don't see us repeating yesterday, because that.
In terms of talking about conference committee reports for hours.
I would say that there are some things that were tabled that will be brought up. Again, the majority is in control of what is brought to the floor. We don't even get that heads up on it. We may have a meeting with the majority, the four leaders may be having a meeting later this afternoon. Depending on how they want to work with us will indicate how we will continue moving through the House floor session tomorrow.
How was the fishing trip as far as all this is concerned? Did you guys get anything done there?
I caught a sauger. That was it. That was really disappointing, but, the fishing trip, I think that the idea of a bipartisan fishing trip, something like that, social, I was with the lieutenant governor in her boat, and it was very enjoyable. It was great to be in the city, in Lake City, in the community, and it's a great idea. As far as work that actually got done here, not really, but anytime you can build relationships, it can always be helpful.
And I'll jump on that too. So I didn't go fishing that day. I got invited on the lieutenant governor's boat, whereas the majority leader and the speaker were on the governor's boat that day. So again, another separation of us from those who we would be able to compromise and make some bipartisan agreements. So to me, it was pretty disheartening to be put on a different boat, away from the governor, away from those who are making some of those decisions that we could really be impactful with. And so I decided I hadn't seen my kids for a couple of weeks, so I went up and spent Mother's Day with my wife and kids. So I think that was a good choice based on the conversations that were actually had there.
Only one sauger.
Only one sauger.
That's all.
Representative Damon, follow up on Quinn's question. I know surprises are fun, but tomorrow's session day, there's going to be bills on the calendar. Are you going to filibuster
those bills tomorrow, or at some point, or you feel your point has been made and allow debate on those bills?
You know, I think the things that we did yesterday were definitely debate. It wasn't going to change the outcome. We have our voice. They have their votes. It wasn't going to change the outcome, but we had legitimate concerns, and we were on message when you look at what was being done in the junk fees bill. We had legitimate concerns. We don't know yet what is going to be brought up. Things are tabled, but like I have said a couple of times, we only know when they announce it what's actually coming up. So I would say we'll work through that. I know there's a number of things that are on the calendar, and our intent is to get that work done tomorrow.
Would you at all consider using that as a tool of negotiation to say if you can address some of our issues, we'll curtail some of the debate in terms of timing?
You know, I know that has been done in the past, and I can't speak to what will happen tomorrow and for the next 4 days, but we are willing to work with Democrats if they invite us to the table and want to actually work in a bipartisan way. That is what we want to do, and whatever that takes to get that work done, we're happy to be part of the conversation and look at it.
Is this the way just to test all the microphones in the House chamber?
Possibly. Mine was not used yesterday, not once.
Mr. Leader, have we heard the last of attempts to try to challenge Senator Mitchell's right to vote or right to be in the Senate?
Well, a lot of Minnesotans are asking us, what are you doing? How is this working in the Senate? Why is there an alleged felon that is voting there? And so we do have several tools in our tool bag. We'll just see when it's appropriate to use those. Again, there'd be no need to bring up motions. There'd be no need to be pointing this thing out had there not been this whole angst against trying to get Republican votes. And so if bipartisan nature, it'd be great. We could get votes with lots of Republican, or bills with lots of Republican votes. But now they're relying on that as a 34th vote, so they're protecting her, and we're just going to point that out to Minnesotans.
I've got two questions from press night here. Troy Vanu wanted to know on straw purchases, which is on the sheet, are you saying you want the binary trigger language taken out in conference committee?
What we'd like to see there is just a clean straw purchaser bill. And so we've got some protection, or some penalties for those who are buying firearms and then used in a crime for somebody else. And so we'd like that. We've got some bipartisan bills there that we think could work. But yeah, there's binary trigger. They've put some other things in there as well. So we want to make sure that we have a clean straw purchaser bill.
Just to clarify, clean is just raising the penalties on straw purchases, nothing else.
Yeah, the language of the original bill, yeah.
But would you want to keep that amendment from, I believe, Senator Cruen on the even higher penalties for guns that are used against law enforcement? It was like the penalties were raised, but there was it was a surcharge penalty.
And you saw bipartisanship on that, right? I mean, that's an amendment that went through and that had bipartisan agreement, so I think that would be a great amendment to maintain on there. I think Minnesotans would expect that.
Second question was from Bill Werner. Now, he asked this before a lot of other questions about what's your must-have, but he wants to know on the other issues list, what are your must-have for the caucus to provide the necessary votes to pass a bonding bill?
Okay. Well, I think, a lot of our must-haves, we want to make sure that we see, what needs to be done is that EMS bill. And that's not a conditional one, that's just one that needs to get done. We also want to see some things fall off. We talked a little bit about like the ERA, the public option is another one that really needs a lot of work going forward on that as well too. We've got, one of the big things too is just a four-leader sign-off on the bills going forward. Just again, showing that bipartisan nature of the legislature and making sure that we can get through the bills that need to be done. There's others in the election bill that we'd like to, the election bill really needs some work on that. And there's other pieces there too, but right now we've given them an offer that we've kind of outlined what we want to see fall off the list and a couple of needs, and you've got that before you right now.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, okay, we're gonna do this again. The EMS funding, the original ask was, I think, 120 million bipartisan support, and then the deal was obviously a lot less, but how did you end up on the 30 million total being good enough for you guys? adding that $14 million on top of that $16 million from the DFL global agreement?
You know, we had heard originally earlier in session that the need or the ask was 122 million or 120 million is what you saw come through. The governor in his proposal earlier this year put 16 million in there. That seemed very, very low. You know, asking is 30 enough? Maybe not, but it's a better start than what was actually being offered by the governor, and I think that's a starting point. If the Democrats have a desire to get this done, they could absolutely increase that and have those conversations with us, but right now we felt 30 would be at least a starting point.
Right now, it looks like there's about $70 million difference. I mean, quantitatively, where does most of that money in differences lie? Between the two offers. You got
Okay, on just the bonding you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about, on that as well. You can do the comparison there. I think that most of that comes from the geo side of things. We wanted to hold that down a bit and just where our caucus was comfortable with that. And so we want to remain in a more affordable area there.
On Friday, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee is going to be in Minnesota. Are either of you attending that speech?
I've been invited, I think we probably both have been invited there, but I know we're going to be very busy on the floor, so it's fluid at this point.
Peter Damath, are you going?
I've also been invited, but I think we're scheduled for Almanac too that night, so potentially. So at this point, with the schedule on the floor and things as fluid as they are, I don't believe that I'll be able to make that.
Will he be helpful for the ticket in 2024 for your members?
You know, we'll have to see. I think that plays different in each part of the state. But what we've been doing when we're looking forward to November, which is our priority, is we've been very intentional about finding great candidates that are well-known in their districts that represent Minnesota well, and that's our focus as we look toward November.
On your sheet here, where you say bipartisan election bill agreement, what's in the election policy bill now that you don't like?
You know, the election policy bill is really interesting. Previous governors, including our current governor, have said that elections should always be bipartisan, and this bill is not. This bill had no Republican bills heard in it. You will hear from the majority, well, there were 3 Republican bills. They were technical fixes. There are no Republican provisions in this elections bill whatsoever. That is a starting point. If it's going to be elections, that clearly is bipartisan, but that work wasn't done.
So your member brought up the residency issue in that debate last night, like, I think Nash called it in a ban down by the river provision of the bill, so that's one of your issues, I take it?
Yeah, one of the issues where residency, you can describe where you might be staying as opposed to providing an address. We also know with the prison population, it would be a look back to where you lived 10 years ago, even if maybe that person is not going to be living there again, and so it really changes those dynamics in the different communities. That's just the start of it, but it is a problematic, very partisan bill and something that should be bipartisan in the state of Minnesota.
All right, we can wrap it up there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Special session question?
What?
Shush, shush.
There's nothing special about a special session.
We didn't even talk about your poster boards.
They speak for themselves, don't they?